This is my true story. For 18 years, my wife visited her first husband's grave every month without fail. She said she needed to honor his memory, and I respected her grief. She would drive 2 hours to the cemetery and spend the afternoon there alone. I never questioned her devotion because I thought it showed she had a loyal heart. But last month, something made me suspicious, and I decided to investigate. I drove to the cemetery myself to see the grave she visited for 18 years. What I discovered there destroyed me completely and exposed a lie that had lasted our entire marriage. Before I tell you, tell us where you are watching from and subscribe. I met my wife 20 years ago when she was a young widow still mourning the loss of her first husband. She told me he had died in a terrible car accident 3 years before we met. She said the accident had been sudden and unexpected. She said he had been driving home from work one evening when another car ran a red light and hit him. She said he died instantly at the scene. She said she had been devastated by his death and spent years grieving him before she was ready to date again. When I met her, she was beautiful, but there was a sadness in her eyes that made me want to protect her. She seemed vulnerable and broken by the loss she had experienced. She talked about her first husband with such genuine emotion that I could feel her pain. She cried when she spoke about him. She said she had loved him deeply and that losing him had been the hardest thing she ever went through. Her grief seemed so real and so profound that I never questioned any part of her story. We dated for 2 years before I asked her to marry me. During those 2 years, she would occasionally mention her first husband and the pain of losing him. She said she would always carry him in her heart. She said she would always miss him. She said she hoped I understood that part of her would always belong to him. I told her I understood completely. I told her that grief was natural and that I respected her need to honor his memory. I thought her continued love for him showed what a loyal and devoted person she was. Before we got married, she sat me down for a serious conversation. She said she needed to be honest with me about something important. She said she would always love her first husband, even though he was gone. She said she hoped I could understand and accept that she would need to visit his grave sometimes to maintain that connection. She said visiting his grave gave her peace and helped her process her grief. She asked if I would be okay with her continuing to visit the cemetery even after we were married. I told her yes, without hesitation. I believed that grief deserved respect and space. I believed that her need to visit his grave was healthy and normal. I thought it showed she had a capacity for deep love and loyalty. I thought if she could love her first husband so profoundly, even after his death, then she would be capable of loving me the same way. I saw her devotion to his memory as a positive quality, not something to worry about. I married her believing I understood who she was and what her grief meant. She warned me gently that she might always carry sadness about losing him. She said there might be days when she seemed distant or melancholy because she was thinking about him. She said she hoped I could be patient with her on those days. She said healing from losing someone you love takes time and might never be complete. I told her I would support her through her grief for as long as she needed. I promised I would never make her feel guilty for loving him or for needing to remember him. Looking back now, I realize how perfectly she had constructed her story. She had created a narrative that explained everything. The sadness in her eyes, the occasional distance in our relationship, the need for privacy and time alone. She had built a character for herself as the grieving widow who would always carry the loss of her first love. And I had believed every word of it. I had believed she was a woman marked by tragedy, when in reality she was something much different. I thought I was marrying someone with a tragic past who needed understanding and patience. I thought I was being a good husband by respecting her grief and giving her space to honor her first husband's memory. I thought I was showing maturity and security by not feeling threatened by her continued love for a dead man. But I was not being mature or understanding. I was being fooled. I was being manipulated. I was believing a lie that my wife had crafted specifically to cover up something I would not discover for 18 more years. The widow I married was not a widow at all. Every month for 18 years, my wife would make the same trip to visit her first husband's grave. She went on the 15th of every month without fail. It did not matter if it was raining or snowing, or if we had other plans. The 15th was her day to visit the cemetery, and nothing would stop her from going. She said she chose the 15th because that was the date they got married. She said visiting on their anniversary date each month helped her feel connected to him and honor what they had shared together. The cemetery was 2 hours away from where we lived. She would leave early in the morning around 9 and would not return until mid-afternoon around 3 or 4. She said she spent hours at the grave talking to him and remembering their life together. She said she would bring flowers and clean the headstone. She said sometimes she would just sit there in silence, feeling close to him. She made it sound like a sacred ritual that gave her peace and helped her process her ongoing grief. I offered to go with her many times over the years. I told her I would be happy to accompany her and provide support. I said I understood she might want time alone at the grave, but that I could wait in the car or walk around the cemetery while she had her private time. I thought it might be nice for her to have company on the long drive, but she always refused my offers gently but firmly. She said this was something she needed to do alone. She explained that having me there would change the experience for her. She said she needed to be completely alone with her thoughts and memories. She said she needed privacy to cry and talk to him without feeling self-conscious. She said it was about closure and about honoring what they had shared. She said I would understand if I had ever lost someone I loved. She made it sound so reasonable and so important that I never pushed back. I respected her need for privacy during these visits. The monthly trips became such a normal part of our routine that I stopped thinking about them. Every month on the 15th, my wife would announce she was going to visit the cemetery. I would kiss her goodbye and tell her to drive safely. She would leave in the morning and return in the afternoon. We would have dinner together, and she would seem calm and at peace, like the visit had given her what she needed. The pattern repeated month after month, year after year, for 18 years without variation. I never questioned the ritual because it seemed like healthy grieving. Therapists and grief counselors talk about the importance of maintaining connections with lost loved ones. Visiting graves is considered normal and therapeutic. My wife's monthly visits seemed like exactly the kind of thing a widow should do to process her loss. I thought I was being supportive by giving her space and never making her feel guilty about continuing to love her first husband. She never talked much about the visits when she returned. If I asked how it went, she would say it was good or peaceful, or that she felt better after going. She did not share details about what she did at the cemetery or what she thought about while she was there. I assumed this was because the experience was private and personal. I assumed she kept those thoughts to herself because they were sacred to her. I never pushed for more information because I thought that would be disrespectful of her grief. For 18 years, this pattern continued. 180 visits to the cemetery. 180 times my wife left our house on the 15th of the month and drove 2 hours away. 180 times I trusted that she was doing exactly what she said she was doing. 180 times I believed the story she told me about visiting her first husband's grave. I never suspected anything was wrong. I never questioned her honesty. I never imagined that the monthly ritual I respected and supported was actually covering up a betrayal that had been happening since before we even got married. Last year, something started to change about my wife's monthly cemetery visits. The changes were subtle at first, and I tried to ignore them. But over time, they became impossible to miss. She would return from the visits with a different energy than she used to have. Instead of seeming calm and peaceful, like she always had before, she seemed almost excited. She would come home with a brightness in her eyes that did not match someone who had just spent hours at a cemetery, mourning a dead husband. I noticed she started wearing new perfume on the days she went to visit the grave. For 18 years, she had gone to the cemetery in casual clothes without makeup or perfume. She said she did not need to dress up to visit a grave. But suddenly she started putting more effort into her appearance on visit days. She would wear nice clothes and do her hair and put on makeup. She would spray perfume before leaving. When I asked about it, she said she just wanted to feel good about herself. But it seemed strange to dress up for a cemetery visit. She also started checking her phone obsessively after returning from the visits. She would come home and immediately go to her phone. She would be texting someone with a secretive smile on her face. When I would walk into the room, she would quickly put the phone down or angle it away so I could not see the screen. If I asked who she was texting, she would say it was just a friend or no one important. But her behavior suggested the messages were more significant than she was admitting. The visits started taking longer than they used to. For 18 years, she had left at 9 in the morning and returned by 3 or 4 in the afternoon. But last year, she started coming home later and later. Some visits she would not return until 6 or 7 in the evening. When I asked why she was taking so long, she said she had stopped for dinner or had driven around thinking. She said sometimes she needed more time to process her emotions. But 9 or 10 hours seemed excessive for a cemetery visit. My gut started whispering that something was wrong. I tried to push the feeling down because I felt guilty for even having suspicious thoughts. What kind of husband suspects his wife of lying about visiting her dead husband's grave? It seemed like the most disrespectful thing I could possibly think. I was ashamed of myself for doubting her. I told myself I was being paranoid and insecure. I tried to convince myself that the changes in her behavior were innocent and that I was reading too much into small things. But the feeling would not go away. Every month on the 15th, I would watch her leave looking excited instead of sad. I would watch her spend hours texting someone when she got home. I would notice how she seemed different in ways that did not match someone grieving. The inconsistencies accumulated over months until I could not ignore them anymore. Something about her monthly visits was not what she claimed it was. I started paying more attention to details. I noticed she would come home smelling different than when she left. Not just the perfume, but something else. Sometimes she smelled like cologne that was not mine. Sometimes she smelled like soap or shampoo that we did not have in our house. Her clothes looked slightly wrinkled, like they had been taken off and put back on. Her hair looked different than when she left, like it had been messed up and then fixed. These were small things, but together they painted a picture I did not want to see. I felt torn between my growing suspicion and my guilt about doubting her. Part of me said I should trust my wife and respect her grief. But another part of me said the evidence was too obvious to ignore. A woman going to a cemetery should come home sad, not excited. A woman visiting a grave should not be texting someone with secretive smiles. A woman honoring her dead husband should not be gone for 10 hours or coming home smelling like cologne. Something was very wrong, and I needed to know the truth, even if I was afraid of what I might discover. I finally made the decision to hire a private investigator. I hated myself for doing it. I felt like I was betraying my wife's trust and disrespecting her grief. But I could not live with the doubt that was eating me alive. I needed to know the truth, even if the truth destroyed me. I found a private investigator who specialized in following people and documenting their activities. I explained the situation and asked him to follow my wife on her next monthly cemetery visit. I wanted to know exactly where she went and what she did. The investigator followed my wife on the 15th of the month when she left for her supposed cemetery visit. He tracked her car from our house and documented everywhere she went. 3 days after the visit, he called me and said he had completed the investigation. He said he had a full report with photographs and detailed timeline. He asked if I wanted him to email the report or if I wanted to meet in person. I said I would come to his office because I needed to see everything with my own eyes. I went to the investigator's office the next day with my stomach in knots. I knew from his tone on the phone that what he found was not good. He sat me down and opened a folder containing photographs and written documentation. He said, "I am sorry, but your wife is not going to any cemetery." The words hit me like a punch. He said he followed her the entire day, and she never went near a cemetery at any point. I felt my world starting to crumble as he continued explaining what he had discovered. The investigator showed me photographs of my wife's car pulling into the parking lot of a luxury hotel 2 hours from our house. He showed me time-stamped photos of her getting out of the car and walking into the hotel lobby. He showed me photos of her meeting a man in the lobby. The man appeared to be in his 50s, well-dressed and clearly expecting her. They greeted each other with a familiarity that suggested they knew each other well. They hugged and kissed in a way that was not friendly or casual. It was intimate. The investigator showed me photos of my wife and the man getting into the elevator together. He showed me documentation that the man had booked a room at the hotel under his name. The investigator had confirmed with hotel staff that the same man booked the same room on the 15th of every month. He had been doing this for years. The hotel staff recognized him as a regular monthly guest. They also recognized my wife from the investigator's description as the woman who met him every month. My wife and the man spent hours in the hotel room. The investigator documented that they entered the room around 11 in the morning. They did not come out until late afternoon, around 5. 6 hours in a hotel room with a man who was not me. 6 hours every month on the 15th. The investigator showed me photos of them leaving the hotel looking relaxed and happy. He showed photos of them kissing goodbye in the parking lot before getting in separate cars and driving away. The investigator said based on the hotel records and staff testimony, this had been happening for at least several years. The hotel staff said the man had been a monthly regular for as long as they could remember. The investigator estimated my wife had been meeting this man at the hotel every month for the entire 18 years of our marriage. 180 hotel visits disguised as cemetery visits. 180 affairs disguised as widow's grief. My wife had been cheating on me every single month for our entire marriage. The report was devastating and undeniable. The photographs showed everything clearly. My wife arriving at a hotel, meeting a man, going to a room with him, staying for hours, kissing him goodbye. There was no cemetery. There was no grave. There was no honoring her first husband's memory. There was only an affair conducted monthly with precision and covered up with lies about grief and closure. I sat in the investigator's office, staring at the photographs, unable to process what I was seeing. My entire marriage had been built on a lie. After seeing the investigator's report, I needed to know if any part of my wife's story had been true. I needed to know if there really was a grave, even if she was not actually visiting it. I needed to know if her first husband had actually died, or if that entire story had been a lie from the beginning. I remembered the name of the cemetery she had told me years ago when we first started dating. She said her first husband was buried at Riverside Memorial Cemetery, about 2 hours north of where we lived. I decided to drive there myself and find out the truth. I drove to Riverside Memorial Cemetery on a Saturday morning. The drive took exactly 2 hours, just like my wife's monthly trips always did. But the cemetery was in a completely different direction from the luxury hotel where the investigator had followed her. She had been driving 2 hours, but not to this cemetery. She had been driving 2 hours to meet her lover at a hotel. But I needed to verify whether the cemetery part of her story had any truth to it at all. The cemetery was large, with hundreds of graves spread across rolling hills. I parked and walked to the main office building. A woman working there asked if she could help me find a specific grave. I gave her the name of my wife's first husband. She searched in her computer system for several minutes. Then she looked up at me and said she could not find anyone by that name in their records. She said she had searched multiple databases, including historical records going back decades. No one with that name had ever been buried at Riverside Memorial Cemetery. I thought maybe my wife had given me the wrong cemetery name years ago. Maybe she had said Riverside but meant a different cemetery in the area. The woman at the office gave me a list of other cemeteries within a 50-mile radius. She said maybe I was thinking of one of those. I spent the rest of the day driving to 4 other cemeteries in the area. At each one, I checked with the office staff. At each one, I gave them the name of my wife's supposed first husband. At each cemetery, the answer was the same. No one by that name was buried there. No records of that person existed. I decided to do a more thorough search at Riverside since that was the cemetery my wife had specifically named. I went back there and spent 3 hours walking through every section of the cemetery. I read headstones looking for the name my wife had given me. I covered the entire cemetery section by section, checking every grave marker. I walked until my feet hurt and the sun was setting. I found nothing. There was no grave with her first husband's name anywhere in that cemetery. I went back to the office before they closed and asked if maybe the records could be wrong. I asked if maybe someone had been buried there without proper documentation. The woman said that was extremely unlikely, especially in recent decades. She said every burial has to be recorded with the cemetery and with the county. She said there is no way someone could be buried there without it being in the system. She said if the person I was looking for was really buried at Riverside Memorial, it would be in their records. Since it was not in the records, he was not buried there. The truth was now undeniable. The grave my wife had been visiting for 18 years did not exist. Her first husband was not buried at Riverside Memorial Cemetery or any other cemetery in the area. She had lied about where he was buried, or more likely, she had lied about him being dead at all. The entire story she told me about losing her first husband in a car accident was probably false. The grief she showed me when we met was probably an act. The cemetery visits she made every month for 18 years were never about visiting a grave because there was no grave to visit. I sat in my car in the cemetery parking lot as the sun set, staring at the headstones in front of me. None of them belonged to my wife's first husband. None of them had ever been visited by my wife. The grave she claimed to visit every month for 18 years to honor his memory and process her grief simply did not exist. It had never existed. It was all a lie. I waited for my wife to return from her next monthly visit before confronting her. It was the 15th of the month, and she left in the morning like she always did. She said she was going to the cemetery to visit her first husband's grave. She kissed me goodbye and drove away. I knew she was actually going to the hotel to meet her lover. I knew she would spend hours with him and return in the evening. I spent the day preparing for the confrontation. I printed out the private investigator's report and photographs. I spread them across our kitchen table so she would see them immediately when she walked in. She came home around 6 in the evening. She walked through the door with her purse and her keys, looking relaxed and happy. She was humming softly to herself. She smelled like cologne and hotel soap. I was sitting at the kitchen table waiting for her. When she walked into the kitchen and saw me sitting there with the photographs spread out in front of me, her expression changed immediately. The happiness drained from her face and was replaced with shock and fear. She stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the photographs on the table. I could see her brain trying to process what she was looking at and how I had obtained these pictures. There were photos of her car at the hotel, photos of her meeting the man in the lobby, photos of her kissing him, photos of her going into the hotel room with him. The evidence was undeniable, and she knew it. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She just stood there, pale and trembling. I said, "There is no grave." My voice was quiet and cold. I said I checked. I said I went to Riverside Memorial Cemetery and spent hours searching every section. I said I checked with the cemetery office, and they have no record of anyone by that name ever being buried there. I said I also checked 4 other cemeteries in the area and found nothing. I said, "Your first husband is not buried where you said he was buried." I said, "So where have you really been going for 18 years? I already knew the answer, but I needed to hear her say it. She still did not speak. She was looking at the photos on the table with tears forming in her eyes. She was caught, and she knew there was no way to explain this away. The photos showed everything. Her lies were exposed completely. I said, "The investigator followed you." I said, "I know you have been going to that hotel every month." I said, "I know you have been meeting that man." I said, "I know you spend hours in a hotel room with him." I said, "I want to know who he is and how long this has been going on." She finally found her voice. She said, "I am sorry." She said it over and over. "I am sorry, I am sorry, I am sorry." But sorry meant nothing. Sorry did not explain 18 years of lies. Sorry did not explain monthly affairs disguised as cemetery visits. Sorry did not undo the betrayal. I said, "I do not want to hear sorry." I said, "I want the truth." I said, "Tell me who he is, and tell me everything." She started crying harder. She said she never meant for this to happen. She said it was complicated. She said she did not know how to explain. I said, "You are going to explain right now, or I am calling a lawyer first thing tomorrow morning." The threat made her realize she had no choice. She had to tell me everything. She sat down at the table across from me and stared at the photographs of her affair. Then she started talking. She said her first husband had not died in a car accident. She said that story was a lie. She said her first husband was alive. She said she had cheated on him with the man I saw in the photographs. She said she left her first husband for that man. She said when we met years later, she made up the death story because saying she was a widow sounded better than saying she was a woman who destroyed her first marriage through an affair. And the monthly visits to his supposed grave were actually monthly affairs with the man she had left her first husband for 18 years ago. My wife's confession poured out between sobs and tears. She said her first husband was not dead, and never had been. She said the car accident story was completely fabricated. She said she made it up when we first started dating because she needed a story that would make her look sympathetic instead of like the person she really was. She said, telling me she was a widow, grieving her dead husband, was easier than telling me she was a woman who had destroyed her first marriage by having an affair and leaving her husband for another man. She said she had been married to her first husband for 5 years. She said the marriage started well but became unhappy over time. She said they grew apart and stopped connecting emotionally. She said she felt lonely and unfulfilled. She was making excuses for what she did next. She said she met a man through work who paid attention to her and made her feel special. She said they started talking, and the talking led to an emotional affair. The emotional affair led to a physical affair. She cheated on her first husband for over a year before finally leaving him. She said she left her first husband and moved in with the man she had been having the affair with. That man was the same man I saw in the investigators' photographs, the man she had been meeting at the hotel every month for 18 years. She said she and her affair partner lived together for about 2 years after she left her first husband. But the relationship did not work out the way she thought it would. She said they fought constantly. She said he was not ready to fully commit to her. She said they broke up and she moved out. After breaking up with her affair partner, she was alone for about a year. That is when we met. She said when we started dating, she knew she needed to explain why her first marriage ended. She could not tell me the truth that she had cheated and left her husband for another man. That would make her look terrible. So she made up the story about him dying in a car accident. She said it was easier to be a grieving widow than an unfaithful ex-wife. People sympathize with widows. People judge women who cheat. But she had never fully ended her relationship with her affair partner. She said even after they broke up, they stayed in contact. She said they still had feelings for each other. She said when she started dating me, her affair partner became jealous. He wanted her back. She said she still had feelings for him too. So she started seeing him again secretly while she was dating me. When I proposed marriage, she said yes, even though she was still involved with him. She said the affair with him continued after we got married. She said she could not let him go, even though she had committed to me. She said she loved both of us in different ways. She said she wanted the stability and security I provided, but she also wanted the passion and excitement he provided. So she decided to keep both relationships. She invented the cemetery visits as the perfect cover. She told me her first husband was buried 2 hours away and that she needed to visit his grave monthly. I believed her and never questioned it. For 18 years, she had been maintaining both relationships simultaneously. Every month on the 15th, she would drive to the hotel and spend hours with her affair partner. They would have sex and talk and pretend they were a couple. Then she would come home to me and pretend to be a faithful wife. She said she knew it was wrong, but she could not stop. She said she was addicted to having both relationships. She said the lie about the cemetery visits made it so easy that she just kept doing it year after year. She said she had promised him multiple times over the years that she would leave me and be with him fully. But she never did. She liked having both of us. She liked having a husband and a lover. She liked living a double life where she got everything she wanted from 2 different men. The fake grave gave her the perfect excuse to disappear one day every month, and no one questioned it because who would doubt a woman visiting her dead husband's grave? As I listened to my wife's confession, I felt my blood run cold with a realization that made everything even worse. I said, "Let me make sure I understand this correctly." I said, "You cheated on your first husband with this man." She nodded. I said, "You left your first husband for him." She nodded again. I said, "Then, you started dating me while still seeing him." She nodded. I said, "You married me while continuing to have an affair with him." She nodded. I said, "So you cheated on your first husband with this man, and then you cheated on this man by marrying me while continuing the affair." She looked down at the table and nodded again. The pattern of betrayal was clear. My wife had been cheating on her first husband throughout their marriage. She left him for her affair partner. But then she started cheating on her affair partner by dating and eventually marrying me. And she had been cheating on me with her affair partner for our entire 18-year marriage. She was a serial cheater who could not maintain loyalty to anyone. She had destroyed her first marriage through infidelity. Then she had spent 18 years destroying our marriage the same way. But there was something else that did not make sense. I said, "The investigator told me your behavior changed recently." I said, "You started coming home later and acting different." I said, "You started checking your phone more and seeming excited instead of calm." I said, "If you have been seeing this same man for 18 years, why would your behavior suddenly change now?" I said, "What is different?" She looked up at me with fear in her eyes. She knew what I was asking. She knew I had figured out there was more to the story. She admitted through fresh tears that there was a third man. She said she had recently started an affair with a coworker at her office. She said she met him last year and they started talking. She said the talking led to flirting. The flirting led to a relationship. She said she had been seeing this new man in addition to continuing her monthly hotel visits with her long-term affair partner. She was now juggling 3 men simultaneously: her husband, her affair partner of nearly 20 years, and a new lover she had just started seeing. I felt sick as the full scope of her betrayal became clear. She was not just cheating on me, she was cheating on everyone. She was cheating on me with her long-term affair partner. She was cheating on her long-term affair partner with the new coworker. She was lying to all 3 of us and keeping all 3 relationships going at the same time. The changed behavior I noticed was because she was excited about the new relationship. The longer hours away from home were because she was meeting the new man in addition to her monthly hotel visits. She was a serial cheater who weaponized fake grief to cover years of calculated betrayal. The widow story gave her the perfect cover. No one questions a woman who says she needs to visit her dead husband's grave. No one suspects that a grieving widow is actually conducting affairs. She had created the perfect lie that gave her freedom to cheat for 18 years without anyone suspecting anything. She played the devoted wife at home. She played the grieving widow one day each month. And behind both those masks, she was someone who betrayed everyone who trusted her. I thought about how she had cried when she told me about losing her first husband. I thought about how genuine her grief had seemed. I thought about how I had felt sorry for her and wanted to protect her. I realized now that I had been manipulated from the very beginning. The tears were fake. The grief was an act. The vulnerability was calculated. She had created a character that would make me fall in love with her and trust her completely. And then she had used that trust to betray me every single month for 18 years. She was not a grieving widow. She was a calculating liar who had perfected the art of deception. She had fooled me completely. She had fooled her affair partner who thought she would leave me for him. She was now fooling her new coworker who probably had no idea she was married and had another affair partner. She was playing all of us, and we were all too blind to see it. I hired a background investigator to dig deeper into my wife's past. I needed to know if anything she had ever told me was true. I needed to verify her story about her first husband and find out exactly who she was before I met her. The investigator worked for 2 weeks tracking down records and interviewing people from my wife's past. What he uncovered confirmed that our entire marriage had been built on lies from the very first day. The investigator found my wife's first husband living in another state. He was alive and remarried with children. The investigator contacted him and explained the situation. The first husband agreed to speak with me on the phone. When I called him, he confirmed everything my wife had confessed and more. He said she had cheated on him throughout their marriage with multiple men. He said the final affair that ended their marriage was with the man she had been meeting at the hotel. He said divorcing her was the best decision he ever made. The first husband said my wife had been a compulsive liar during their marriage. He said she lied about small things and big things constantly. He said he could never trust anything she told him. He said she created elaborate stories to cover her tracks. He said she was very good at manipulating people and making them feel sorry for her. He said he felt bad for me because he knew exactly what I was going through. He said she would never change because lying and cheating were core parts of who she was. I also had the investigator contact the hotel lover. The investigator showed him the evidence we had and explained that I knew about the affair. The hotel lover initially denied everything, but eventually admitted the truth when faced with the photographs and documentation. He said he had known about me the entire time. He said my wife had told him when we first started dating. He said she promised she would leave me eventually, but that never happened. He said for 18 years she told him she just needed more time. The hotel lover said he had accepted being her secret affair partner because he loved her and believed her promises. He said she told him she was only staying with me for financial security, but that her real feelings were for him. He said she told him she would leave me once she felt financially stable enough. But 18 years passed, and she never left. She just kept seeing him once a month at the hotel while maintaining her marriage to me. He admitted he was a fool for believing her lies for so long. The investigator also identified the third man, who was my wife's co-worker. The investigator contacted him and revealed that my wife was married and had another affair partner. The co-worker was shocked. He said he had no idea she was married. He said she never mentioned a husband. She told him she lived alone. She said she was single and available. He said they had been dating for about 8 months. He said he thought their relationship was exclusive and serious. He had no idea she was married to me and still seeing her hotel lover. He felt betrayed and used. The investigation revealed that my wife had been systematically lying to everyone in her life for years. She lied to her first husband throughout their marriage. She lied to me from the day we met through 18 years of marriage. She lied to her hotel lover for nearly 20 years, making promises she never intended to keep. She lied to her coworker about being single and available. Every relationship in her life was built on deception and manipulation. She was not capable of honesty or loyalty with anyone. The house of lies she had constructed was massive and elaborate. She had created entire false histories and identities. She had maintained multiple relationships simultaneously while keeping them all separate. She had used fake grief and fake vulnerability to manipulate people into trusting her. She had perfected the art of lying so thoroughly that she had fooled everyone for years. But now, the truth was finally exposed. The lies were documented. The betrayals were proven. And there was no way for her to talk her way out of what she had done. I filed for divorce immediately after uncovering the full extent of my wife's betrayal. I met with a lawyer and brought all the evidence. The private investigator's photographs showing her at the hotel with her affair partner. The documentation of 18 years of monthly visits that were actually affairs. The testimony from her first husband confirming her pattern of cheating and lying. The statement from her hotel lover admitting the long-term affair. The statement from her co-worker who had been deceived into thinking she was single. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. The lawyer said I had one of the strongest cases for divorce based on adultery he had ever seen. 18 years of documented systematic fraud and infidelity. Multiple affairs conducted simultaneously. A pattern of deception going back to before our marriage even started. The lawyer said my wife would have no grounds to contest anything. She would not be able to claim any sympathy from the court. Her behavior was so egregious that she would be lucky to get anything in the divorce settlement. My wife tried to defend herself when I served her with divorce papers. She tried to claim that the situation was complicated and that she loved all of us in different ways. She said she never meant to hurt anyone. She said she just got caught up in a situation she could not control. She said she had been trying to figure out how to end things, but did not know how. She was still lying even when faced with absolute proof of her betrayal. She was still trying to manipulate the narrative to make herself look like a victim instead of the perpetrator. But love does not hide behind fake graves and manufactured grief. Love does not maintain 3 relationships simultaneously through lies and deception. Love does not use a dead husband story to cover years of affairs. Love does not promise multiple people a future while committing to no one. What my wife felt was not love. It was selfishness and manipulation and an addiction to deception. She wanted everything from everyone without giving loyalty or honesty to anyone. The divorce was finalized within 6 months. The judge was not sympathetic to my wife's claims of complicated love. The judge said her behavior showed a pattern of fraud and calculated deception that went beyond typical marital infidelity. My wife received a minimal settlement and left with very little. She moved away shortly after the divorce was finalized. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she moved to be with her hotel lover finally after 20 years of promising him she would. I wondered how long it would take before she started cheating on him too. Her first husband's grave never existed because her first husband never died. The grave was empty because it was never real. The grave existed only as a convenient fiction that gave my wife permission to disappear one day every month to conduct affairs. For 18 years, I had respected her need to visit that grave. I had given her space and privacy to honor her supposed grief. I had never questioned her monthly trips because I trusted her. I thought her loyalty to her dead husband's memory showed what a devoted person she was. But there was no grave. There was no death. There was no grief. There was only deception. I spent 18 years respecting grief that did not exist, while my wife spent 18 years perfecting lies I was too trusting to question. Some graves hold bodies and mark the end of a life. My wife's fake grave held nothing but the truth I had been blind to for 18 years. The truth that the woman I married was not a grieving widow, but a serial cheater who weaponized fake grief to cover systematic betrayal. The truth that our entire marriage had been built on lies from the first day. The truth that I had loved and trusted someone who was incapable of honoring either. If I had dug into her cemetery story years earlier, I would have discovered there was no grave. But I trusted her. I believed her grief was real. I never imagined someone would lie about something so sacred. Now I know better. Now I know that some people will lie about anything if it serves their purposes. And now I know to trust actions over words and verify stories that seem too perfectly convenient. The grave that never was taught me that lesson 18 years too late.